Welcome to Quantum Thinking 2023. My name is André Chaves, founder of Future Hacker. We are celebrating 3 years where we will build a global community with incredible people from over 4 nationalities and have background in more than 100 different areas of knowledge, who will work on projects of great impact for the future. Our mission is to expand human mindset and knowledge frontiers. Today, we will have an exciting debate on the boundary between reality and fiction. Let's get started with my partner, Eduardo Iha, to dive deeper into our day today. Let's go, Edu.
Thank you, André. First of all, I'd like to invite everyone to follow us in our social media to access more amazing content. Throughout history, our curiosity about the future as individuals and society has always brought us some restlessness. Sci-fi movies and books have become powerful prototypes of our imagined futures, driven by technological evolution or utopian, dystopian visions. Sci-fi narratives take us on imaginative journeys, blending humanity, technology's impact, and scientific hypotheses into compelling stories. While we lack a crystal ball, our creativity and imagination enable us to envision hypothetical futures. Whether fueled by curiosity or necessity, this process prepares us, calms us, or ignites a sense of urgency for what lies ahead. Now, we are thrilled to welcome Marta Ordeig, the founder of Garage Stories and our keynote speaker. She'll share her experience of merging innovation, storytelling, sci-fi to create impactful projects in our world. Marta, it's an honor to have you here. Welcome, and the stage is all yours.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, because I am a huge fan of your work and how many people you've managed to bring together from so many different fields. Also, because the other guests that are going to be part of the debate are also super amazing, super interesting, and with very different backgrounds and visions. And third, because I love storytelling. I feel science fiction is an amazing field that hasn't been taken seriously for a long time. So this is like just like an opportunity to have the best time. So thank you so much. And to get started right away, can you all see my screen? You should be seeing Tom Cruise standing into a screen, and I will get started right away and just play this short video.
Oh, I love this part. I've got no address, last known otherwise. No tax returns for the last 5 years.
Check in CIC. Maybe he's got a microphone. Send a protection team as soon as we lock location. It looks like federal housing, concrete and glass egg crates.
Ouch. With 1,000 of those in the district.
Fractured images coming in. Numbers.
This is one of the most famous scenes of Minority Report, a movie that was released on October 2002, but it was set in 2054. But as most of the time, I will say that the most interesting story is the backstory of that movie. And I would love to talk to you about the man in the black shirt. But first of all, let's see how it started. So Steven Spielberg, who was the director after releasing the super popular film E.T. in 1988, he decided to bring more scientific knowledge into his films. So in 1999, 3 years before the Minority Report was even getting into production stage, he convened a 3-day conference in Santa Monica, where he brought together urban planners, technology specialists, economists, etc., and a lot of members from the MIT Media Lab. He brought them all together to put together an 80-page Bible about what the year 2054 could look like. Part of this group was also, for example, guys like Jaron Lanier, who is the father of VR, and many other relevant pioneers. And also this man whose name is John Undercover. And he was actually hired to be the scientific advisor of Minority Report. So essentially, he left the MIT Media Lab in Boston and flew to Hollywood to help design this technology that you have just seen on the first clip that I presented. He spent, I think it was like about a year trying to envision how this technology will work. Actually, this technology was the result of his research at the MIT, altogether with other of his colleagues. But one of the things that was very interesting that I read when I was exploring how they put this technology together is that they didn't only design for screen how it will work. They also design for the screen like small mistakes, like regular technological glitches, so they could make it super realistic, and that was part of the design of it all. So fast forward, once the movie was released in 2002, he started receiving a bunch of calls for Fortune 500 companies who were interested in the technology that they had seen on the movie. And they were interested to know that whether this technology was available, and if not, if he could build that for them. So John spent, I think was a couple more years, 3 years working in Hollywood, helping other movies. I'm not sure right now which ones, but I think Hook one of them. And in 2006, he left Hollywood to start his own company where he actually wanted to develop this technology that's called G-Speak. And this is a short trailer. This video has no sound, by the way. This video is on the website of his company, Oblong Technologies, where he tells the story actually in a very interesting way of how the whole company started. But here you can see what you saw in Minority Report, the development backstage of this technology. It was not only about the being able to move the information by hands and to interact with it this way, but also having all the screens interconnected and so on. And this is the current, this is a screenshot of Oblong Technologies, his company today. There is a whole other story about this, why this technology or this form of interacting with information didn't work the way he envisioned, but he still kept the interaction between screens and so on. And he has a whole game line of products based on this technology. And he's also currently the director of Looking Glass, which is actually one of the first tech providers of Garage Stories, the company that I run. And essentially, there are holograms that are inside crystals, and they can also interact with them with movement and so on. But moving on, it's also interesting how still in 2019, a lot of news articles refer to movies when they want to talk about certain technologies, because at the end, movies is what most people know or can relate to when we're talking about things that maybe don't exist yet. This article is from 2019, so this was 17 years after the movie. Another thing that's interesting is how in many articles, they call it a premonition, right? As if like whatever happened in the movie was something that someone envisioned and was completely right about that thing was going to happen. And here is another recollection of other examples. For example, we'll have this movie, Total Recall, where they envisioned the driverless cars, and that was in 1990. Or in 1927, where we envisioned robots in the movie Metropolis, or even something that right now doesn't even sound like something new, like digital billboards. We've seen them for so long and so many places that they sound like the most commonplace. It wasn't in 1982. Or this movie from 1968, where they envisioned tablet computing, space tourism. I'm not sure we are there yet, and city. So yeah, this is some interesting examples, right? And this is one of the big questions. Do they predict the future, or they help us envision what it could look like? And here, an interesting article I also found about Elon Musk, where he was talking about the science fiction book that inspired him to start SpaceX. So going back to the original question on whether those movies and those writers and those directors were could see into the future or what's actually going on, I started looking into the power of stories, right? Like not only about the future, just stories in general. And stories have been with us since forever. Is the most is a tool that we've had since always, and it's a way that we are able to transmit knowledge, to preserve the past, to communicate the present, and sort of forecast or envision the future rather than forecast, maybe. And stories are particularly powerful when they work in constellations. And by that, it means that they may be different stories about different topics, different characters, but at the end, they reinforce similar visions or similar messages. Stories working in constellations, they are really, really powerful. And one example that's not science fiction at all is Disney. All Disney movies are different. They have different stories. But at the end, in that case, they reinforce a very similar message about the role of women in society. Also, stories can completely destroy that social standards, and they can go and do the reverse action. And Sex in the City is pretty much a classic by now. But at the time it appeared, it was a whole revolution on how could they be portraying such freedom in women their age. But if we continue with the thought of constellations and science fiction, if we look to a lot of science fiction that has been around for quite some years, at the end, one thing that these movies have in common is that normally there is one single hero, normally a white male, that saves the planet in company of a beautiful girl. That's the imaginarium that they have projected on us about the future. And also it's normally like absolutely destroyed worlds. So at the end, this is what we start envisioning that's the future, because it's not only one movie, it's a whole constellations of movies that create this sort of imaginarium of what the future could or would look like. Also looking into narratives in other aspects. Let's say, for example, 2 examples about economic stories. There is a brilliant book called The Narrative of Economics that talks about how storytelling has influenced so many economic crises and movements. And for example, a very quite not sure recent but contemporary one is artificial intelligence and the narrative that they are going to take away our jobs. This narrative that becomes viral, they have a huge power. Let's say, for example, in a country where there is high rates of unemployment, this narrative that AI is going to take all of our jobs away, then what could potentially happen is that people, before that happens, start spending their savings into buying real estate or stock markets just because they are scared of that future that they envision. That will have a huge real impact on the real estate market. So that's now power of storytelling. And looking at Bitcoins, coins that in many ways, their value depends on the value that we all believe that they have. So, for example, Bitcoins in general have a very sexy narrative because it's about going against the system, and it's young, cosmopolitan people that are questioning everything and they're trying to change the system. So it's a very, very, very attractive narrative. So, conclusion here is so far that narratives are extremely powerful. So if they have this power at all these levels, imagine the power that they also have about the way we forecast the future. That's the only thing that we can actually not see or even check with anything else. At the end, once we've seen so many movies that showcase such a very similar future, at the end, that's what we are assuming that we're moving to. And also here, I started looking at some new trends in the use of science fiction today that I think that's going to tie pretty well with some of the debate points of view, more in depth. Here is just a brief introduction and summary. One of the first interesting new trends that I found in science fiction today is that before, and as I was showing, because the science fiction movies that I was showing maybe are from 2000 more or less, most of them. Here is more the shift between the hero being an individual, like let's say Spider-Man, just to put an example, to a rising trend of the heroes being a group of people. Like, for example, at this show, the Expanse, that's based on a books, where the protagonists, the main characters, are a group that are the United Nations Security Council. And they are essentially, I will talk a bit more about the narrative later, but they are a team and there is no such main character per se. But even in Spider-Man, if you see the latest movie of Spider-Man, there is not only one Spider-Man anymore. There is a bunch of Spider-Mans that they sort of work together. They also fight together because they are mimicking humans. So yeah, that's what happens. But essentially, there is not one single hero anymore. It's a collective of heroes. Another interesting trend is like authoritarian governments and the potential damage that corporates can cause. It's also a raising topic. So, for example, Leviathan Falls is one of the books of The Expanse, the TV show, the series that I was showing before, and this one, despite it's a space opera, it's called new space opera, which are not so much about space races anymore and just fighting, but it's more about ethics and post-colonialism and social differences. And there is a lot of ethics and morals that are brought into the questions. Let's say that the space is the excuse to talk about all of this, but it's not anymore on the core of the thing that we are discussing. Also, this other book, for example, Autonomous, it's about pharmaceuticals and an industry that's tailored for good, how certain strategies or protocols or whatever can actually take it to the other side. And also this other book, it's actually a whole series that's quite famous, and it's related to climate change. But the fifth book, it's all about politics and how ambition and the systems that we establish, that then they seem like they have been always like that, and it's also again about power and ethics. So ethics is one of it's taking sort of the center stage instead of being a secondary topic on the themes. And also, of course, climate change is one of the things that worries us the most because it's a pressing issue. So there is a lot of science fiction about climate change. One thing that's interesting about this subgenre is, like, despite its literature, isn't dismissed the same way that a lot of science fiction is. So there is even PhDs that are based on climate science fiction. And I found these two ones. That this one, the Broken Earth, is the one that this other book belongs to. The 5th season also belongs to this collection, and it's one of the most well-renowned books in that area. And also New York 2040, which is also very interesting because it takes a quite interesting edge on climate change, and I don't want to make a spoiler about it. Another raising trend is, for example, Afrofuturism, but it's also like a lot of minorities that are also taking the center stage and using science fiction to change the story, or to talk about their story in different ways. So that was a book that became very famous. Now it's a series in Amazon. It's very interesting how science fiction is being used to talk about the past and history and to sort of bring new points of view into the table. And linked to that, there is more and more international work. Till now, predominantly, the most famous science fiction stories have been mostly from the US, and also normally male writers. Now there is a huge diversity, like from international works from all different countries, which also brings very different perspectives, and it changes completely the kind of main characters that we were used to having Also gender diversity and so on. So there is like a whole new, there is more underdog science fiction, to call in a way, because there is much more widespread of voices, and it's much easier for people to get their works out. Also, and this is a trend that we were also seeing before when talking about the new space opera, where the space is the cues. More and more books are not so much about ideas or concepts, are more about people and behaviors and social textures. And for example, this book from Tochi, it's about how etiquette and bureaucracy, not only when it comes to more distant circles we live in, but also when it comes to family and friends, how these protocols that are defined or pre-established and that we don't question, how these could take also like strange turns, to call it some way. And another trend that's also very interesting, it's in, for example, Black Mirror. One thing that I feel they have done brilliantly is that they have made you the main character. A lot of the chapters are very relatable to you and how the technologies that we are really using can actually affect you in very negative ways, but they have made it very personal. And I think that has been a huge, a very interesting approach to this. This is a few of the main trends, and I'm sure like the other participants during the debate will be able to elaborate on them way more. But here also looking at methodologies, like innovation methodologies that have embraced science fiction in their practice, right? And I would say that the most common one is design fictions, no? At the beginning, where the way we will go and solve a problem, right? It's like we have a problem, then we use business, design, and technology, and we have a solution. So it's very focused on the now. I have a problem now. Which tools I have, I solve it. Evolving, there came speculative design. So it started forecasting or trying to envision what will be the potential impact of technology or the different developments of technology. And then we get to design fiction, where it takes one more step and it starts envisioning how these new tech futures are interconnected and are affecting politics and society and ethics. So it's not only here, I feel the arrows are only going up, but I also feel that they should go up and down, because at the end there is like a system where everything is constantly influencing the other thing. So politics is influencing society all the time. Society is influencing politics all the time. So I think there is a lot of arrows missing in this graphic, but as a general idea works. And one of the most interesting techniques that design fiction has is diegetic prototyping, which is essentially objects that tell stories about possible worlds. And just to make it like crystal clear, that will be a perfect example of what is design fiction. Because that particular box of cereals that are made of organic cricket flour, will only exist on a very particular world where certain things have taken place. So around this object, there is a lot of stories and a lot of information to be digested. Other examples all around food, but for example, this coffee that doesn't track your data, or this antiviral pasta, which is for a very apocalyptic world. So these simple objects have so much thought into it, and they help us sort of make those futures tangible. And this is essentially what Minority Report did. They created a technology that made sense in a specific context. They gave it a use. As I was saying, they also created glitches on that technology, so it could be extremely realistic and applicable and relatable. And there is a lot of companies, like, for example, I found this, a lot of companies that are starting to hire science fiction writers to use their visions sort of to stay on top of the wave, right? To not only do what they can do today, but to start to look more ahead. And for example, Microsoft had this lab that they call Future Visions, where they invited 9 science fiction authors, and they gave them access to the Microsoft Research Center. And so they could work with it, and they brought their stories about what those technologies and the research that was being undertaken could lead to. And this is a meme that I found like casually, but I thought that was very interesting on how, on what I think that happens a lot of times, right? There is the ethic perspective, and there is also, oh, that's cool, let's do it. So I think like this graphic describes very well what happens in many occasions. Because at the end, of course, decisions are made for different reasons, and not everyone has the same goals. So this is a little bit the brief recap about science fiction, the way it's used as an introduction for the debate that's also going to take part later. But I would also like to share very briefly, which is our personal take of garage stories in science fiction. I have a very short video of 1 minute, so you understand more what we do, so then it makes more sense the way we work with it. So this is going to play, it's very short. Just a brief introduction so it makes more sense what I'm going to explain now and how we use and how we apply storytelling in science fiction. For us, despite Garage Stories that started as an innovation lab for storytelling, we more and more started realizing the potential that storytelling has innovation. So we sort of reverted the sentence. And we start seeing in the first place how a lot of solutions or ideas are actually based in storytelling, how changing the narrative or how adding these narrative to ideas can really help those ideas grow. But also, if you look at the most common image of a startups, you will always normally see a picture like that, where they go from pre-seed to growth, and they always stay on the small green leaves. And we believe, especially because we normally work for projects for impact, that storytelling, in the same way that can make us believe that the future is going to be dark, destroyed, and there is no solution left for us, it can also have the complete opposite effect. So we believe that those startups, those ideas that are proposing change, that are necessary, that are for good, with storytelling, they can reach its maximum potential in the first place, because they make those projects relatable, and because they can activate mostly also collective action. And there is a lot of ideas that actually need this collective action to reach their maximum potential. So we sort of see that stories, that's what they can bring to ideas working hand in hand, because the story in a way creates this need or this collectiveness or this community, and the idea, the startup gives a call to action to make that a reality. So we really see that that combination very powerful, in the same way that we believe that environment is everything. Community, where those ideas and those projects are planted, is one of the most important things. We still love new media, and the way of how we see what new media brings to the table is that visually, I imagine new media as one of these super busy markets. Because in these busy markets is in the same way what you can do in an immersive and interactive experience. It's a place where you go to socialize, to hear the news, to make business. And one of the three key elements for me that new media can bring into the table is the concept of interaction with the story, with the creator, but also with other participants that are also other members of the audience. Also the involvement, because you are part of the story, so it's harder to stay removed or neutral. And also because it creates commitment, because more and more what these technologies are allowing, making it more social, is that actions that I can actually translate into the real world. So in a way, we see a little bit the evolution of what technology has empowered. Initially art, let's say I have put here a sculpture where I could have put a book. It's more of a monologue where me as an audience can watch and feel and react and share these ideas with my friends and my colleagues, but it's more like of a monologue from the creative to the audience. And digital art sort of empower and sorry for the examples, it's just to illustrate the concept. It allowed the conversation between the creators and then having people feedback and starting conversations and allowing people to be part in a way of the story. But the third level is how this new media, these experiences, immersive and interactive, can allow people to co-create experiences with the direct input in the real world. And one example or one use case that I really love, for example, is digital twin copies of cities, where they allowed ideas and projects to be tested in these digital copies of the cities, because before they are actually implemented. In my opinion, these cities they're missing a lot of storytelling to actually reach the level of impact that they could have. But a project like this, if you add storytelling and you allow people to get involved into building these cities, I think that they're like excellent tools for community and co-creation, which at the end, for me, the future should be democratic. And I think one of the trends in science fiction that I love the most is the one that's opening the doors to so many people to be able to share their stories and then to bring in so many different points of view. I think that allow us not to take the future as it is, but to take an active role on what we would like this future to look like, because I feel most people don't think that they have any power in the future. And one game I normally do in a lot of workshops is I make an axe on the floor, asking people if they think the future is going to be better or worse on one axe. And on the other axe is how much power do they feel they have in contributing to that future. And most people, like, they may change maybe better or worse, normally worse, but like most people stay on the side of the line that they think they have no power. And I think this is the first message or the first thing that should be changed, to empower people to understand that we all have a say in the future. And the more it scares you, the more you should get involved, because otherwise there is someone else taking that decision for you. And till here, it's my presentation. I have prepared a little game that I don't know. How do you want me to handle or explain the game? Maybe I should briefly explain it, and then you guys can play with it. But essentially, you will have a table like this. And then you will have two folders, one with focus, which is what goes in here. So there is many different topics. You can choose whichever one is more interesting for you. And then you can also choose a technology. And it's a little game to design a superhuman. And I was very, very, very careful to use superhumans and not superheroes. Because at the end, a little bit, the concept of superhuman is how technology is going to empower us to become more powerful in a way that's desirable to us. So here on this fast board is just to choose your focus and your technology, the main technology you want to focus on. You can choose more than one, of course. Just the settings, in which year are you thinking that story, 2054, I don't know, 2025 or 2300, whatever, and a short premise. And the three prompts that I invite you to imagine based on all the interesting conversation that happens today is choose between one of these three options. The first one will be to make a storyboard about one day in the life of the superhuman in first person. So you really try to envision what happens in one day of the life of that person. Second option is that you write a news article about some event where that superhuman, that's very important, superhuman was involved. And the third one is about an advertisement about that technology / object empowered by technology that gives you superpowers. So you can choose between one of the three. And yeah, that's that. But I think that they have planned to do this game afterwards. So yeah, that's for me now. I don't know if there is any questions, or how do you want to do this?
Great, Marta. What a great presentation. About the material, we're going to share with everybody afterwards. We're going to send the link to everybody who is watching us. And of course, they have. We're going to make available all your content also, so people can make contact directly to you. So, thank you very much, Marta. And well, for the second and final part of the event, I'll invite Maria Taide, partner at Future Hacker, to moderate the roundtable that will bring together leading international experts for an incredible debate. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, and thank you, Marta. It was a really great presentation, a lot to discuss, definitely. And so, let's talk about how it's going to play from now on, okay? We have 3 very special guests with us today. Each will have around 10 minutes to share their perspectives. Afterward, we'll have a roundtable debate, followed by opening up for questions from the audience. So, everybody, you have the chat working right there on your right. Feel free to use it, discuss, exchange ideas, and ask your question.
And at the end, we'll do our best to address at least some of them, right?
If you go to the links tab, also on your right, there's a very short survey that if you could kindly answer before you leave the event, it would be amazing. So let's begin with our future hacker, Paula Martini, the founder of the media literacy initiative Internet das Pessoas, which means Internet of People. She's also a futurist and a sci-fi enthusiast, especially when it comes to books. Paula was the former head of innovation at the worldwide renowned Museum of Tomorrow in Rio de Janeiro. Recently, she organized and launched an amazing exposition focused on the Brazilian style sci-fi. I believe this will be a great way to kickstart our conversation as we discuss the differences between mainstream and blockbuster sci-fi productions versus regional initiatives. Welcome, Paula.
Hi all. Good to hear you, Marta. Thank you for your explanation. Thank you for this invitation as well. And regarding, I'd like to start with something that Marta just brought in the main frame of what she said, but mostly in the end as a message regarding desirable futures. I think we have tools in order not to navigate only around dystopias and utopias as well. Maybe we can more than predict or just feel what's coming. It's so our way, a very specific way to think about and to let's say make a tangible form of what may come next, an anticipatory way, but mostly regarding what we want to see in the world. I think that's a point where I want to start from. And as was said, I just run an exposition. It's now on the Museum of Tomorrow here in Rio de Janeiro, that uses our very own visions, possible visions of the future, desirable visions of the future. Let's say putting together Afrofuturism, indigenous futurism, and ways to look at time and futures with a very Brazilian way of doing it. And so this is what I want to start from, because as we are now inside this IA revolution, sorry for my broken English, it's been a while. We are within this AI revolution, we are mostly, when we come to narrative, people in general don't have this very essential part of our heuristic, of our way to see things and to make sure it happened or not. Let's say deep fakes. When I see something, my brain thinks if I saw something, it happened. But now we are getting into a time, the very beginning of a long time, in which this kind of thinking, this kind of heuristic won't work anymore. And so I created Internet of People, which is Internet das Pessoas in Portuguese, so that people in general can have a little bit more of media literacy, a digital literacy, in order to gain more sovereignty or to be more autonomous regarding our daily life, because we just cannot separate anymore online and offline lives. And taking a look at, just bring it all together, taking a look at those speculative futures in which we can and maybe we should try to put together our originary ways of comprehension of time, of social, of economics as well, circular economic, and something like this. If we get this freedom, if we work on taking lots of layers that we've been, since we were children, we've been gaining layers of prohibition on how to think about the future. And so when I bring this literacy, digital and media literacy, I also work in a way that mostly, more than being users, we should feel like we are empowered to act as producers and as people that imagine what will be coming next. Mostly for children, I love to have them as the main audience of everything I do, but I work through families and through educators so that they can pass the message in a way that those children will be able to get. And so this experience, just to close this experience regarding this exhibition, it's called Sci-Fi, but it's not sci-fi as I'm telling you this important in English, but it's written down SAIFAI, just like if someone that doesn't speak English would be hearing it and being very sure that those kinds of futures could only exist if we take this mission of bringing together what brought us here. And that's one of the points in which, that's one of the points regarding which I'm a very huge fan of Afrofuturism authors like Octavia Butler, and Marta also brought some trends regarding it, because I think we are done of those innocuous futures, very global north futures, and that's time for us to bring what we have in essence that makes us different in a way to look at social and social mostly relations for people. And I also had the opportunity to at the Museum of Tomorrow as well. I was working in this UNESCO chair for futures literacy. I could be a multiplier. I could do some workshops for multiplying these anticipatory methods in which we can think about the future and mostly empower people to be the actors. It's a partnership between the Museum of Tomorrow and the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And I think this is a very important way. It's the first UNESCO chair to be hosted in a museum, not a university, because anyway, chairs are always related to academic issues. And thinking about speculation and mostly this putting up desirable futures, I think this was a kickoff in a way we should be approaching futures looks. And I think it's this. As for starting, I'd love to hear from all the guys that are around. And thank you again.
Great, Paula. Thank you so much. And for the audience that will have the chance to be in Rio de Janeiro, don't miss Museum of Tomorrow. So the Sci-Fi exhibition is still on. And Paula, we also here at Future Hacker believe that media literacy is so important that we are actually doing a roundtable just about it pretty soon. So guys, stay tuned. One more note is that everybody, don't be shy. The chat is there. Make your questions. Your chance is now, okay? And we're going to go through them after the roundtable. So next, we have our Future Hacker, JP Melo, our second timer here in Quantum Thinking. So JP, thank you so much for being here with us again. He's the head of sales in the high-tech industry at Microsoft. And apart from being a tech enthusiast, he also has a passion for music. Recently, he has been specifically excited about the use of artificial intelligence to bring the past to our present and then discuss the future. Isn't that right, JP? We're delighted to have you back with us today. I can't hear to wait your insights once again.
No, I appreciate the invitation again, Maria, Andrea, thanks for the great panel discussion here, starting with Marta and your exposition. Appreciated, Marta. Thank you, Paula, for your exposition as well. Looking forward to hearing from Sylvia. I loved everything, just setting the stage on what Marta said about the matrix that she drew, where people believe about the future being better or worse, and then people having the ability to control and not control the future. I totally believe in that, because I think anyone can not only predict, but most importantly, shape the future, right? So anything that we put in our minds to work will happen. So if people start believing in something, that something will likely, most likely happen. And something that I heard from Paula's interview with Future Hacker, the future scenarios are the materialization of what we desire, energize, and create in the present. And I love that line, because that's totally in line with what we can portray of what we want the future to be, right? And talking about sci-fi, and I think Sylvia mentioned this in our prep call, that sci-fi, positive sci-fi stories are not fun. Let's put it that way, right, Sylvia? There's always, predictions on chaos and issues with less positiveness, even though futurism prediction seems to paint a positive world of solutions, right? And the collective minds, in my point of view, tends to think about job eliminations, robotic wars, and some negative scenarios, and that's what sells movies. But stepping back, thinking about, very simple innovation, thinking about cars that change transportation, electricity that change our lives, computer even, right? That created job opportunities, not eliminated job opportunities. these technologies can also be used for, negative ways. Destruction. Cars can be used to kill people. Electricity can be used to power weapons. Computers can be used to cyber attack, drug smuggling, and so on and so forth. So to your point, Maria, for me, AI is the new chapter of the book that we can either continue to build these negative stories that sell or create in our collective mind the positive and bright futures that we're looking forward to, right? And we have to choose our time and energy wisely, in my point of view, that we'll certainly, be able to shape this future that we so desire. And something else that I like very much when Marta exposed the game on how we build our superhumans, right? In my opinion, and also collectively at Microsoft, we believe that AI is a co-pilot and not an autopilot of our life, right? It is an augmented intelligence. So it's here to build that superhuman. And but AI is as good as its data, right? So if you're skewing data, you have only results that portray a determined group within the data set. And what we need to do is to ultimately democratize this data and to filter, triple check the data. And most importantly, my opinion is to live according to what we want in the future. So that data that is being captured on our daily lives can be created seamlessly, right, into a positive future other than a chaotic sci-fi blockbuster, right? I do have some other expositions that I wanted to portray to the broader audience, but just my last comment maybe on what Paula just said. When kids, we are gaining layers as kids of prohibition since we were kids, of course, and losing the capability to dream. And I remember when I was a young boy, 8 years old, learning to program BASIC and my TK95 computer and, doing crazy stuff to try to predict the future, heavily inspired by music, by movies and, a big science fiction book from, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that predicted the submarine or even Back to the Future and others. But also how I was able to get that creative juice and think about things that could change the world, or at least to our point, shape the world to where we want to be, right? So very quick examples. Remember driving my car around the 90s and listening to my radio or CD or whatever was playing on my car at the time, but looking to the side and looking at other cars and people singing their music inside their cars. And music, as to your point, Maria, is my life, is my passion. And I would love, I was thinking I would love to know what that person's listening to, right? And 30 years later, we have that capability by sharing what we're listening in real time, or playing soccer on Atari or, 8-bit games, and thinking, wouldn't it be great to have a game that we could manage live of a soccer player from the beginning of their career to the end? And, EA Sports is here. And multiple other examples, like even in 1996, if I'm not mistaken, when I founded my first company with my associates at the time, we built a business case to disrupt the music industry in 96, where we thought, music could be commercialized through the internet using MP3s, and the record business would fail to be as it was at that time. And then, fast forward years later, we saw Napster, then iTunes, then Spotify, and so forth. But as a side note, we didn't get the funding because the VC thought this idea was so crazy and the record companies would never die and would never change, that, it's like being Jules Verne writing about the 20,000 under the sea and predicting the submarine, and people call him crazy, right? So my point is the future, is the manifestation of our personal and our collective wishes and needs, for the bad, for the good, and that we have to focus our energies to building a bright future. That's my opening statement.
I just loved it, JP, absolutely. And I next time I introduce you, I'll make sure to add that you're a visionary as well, right?
I'm an optimist.
For sure. And okay, so next, we are giving our future hacker Sylvia Galluser the screen. Sylvia is also a second timer in quantum thinking. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for being back here with us today. She can offer some incredible perspectives as she wears many different hats: as a consultant, as the global futurist at Accenture, a sci-fi enthusiast and a consumer, and a writer focused on future scenarios. So welcome back, Sylvia. We would love to hear what's on your mind today.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Maria. Just wanted to check that everyone can hear me well. There was some echo previously. Sounds good? All right. Yeah, so thank you so much, Maria and Future Hacker, for inviting me to speak today along such wonderful futures thinkers and futures builders. I'm always impressed and inspired by the work Future Hacker does for the community of futurists and future inquirers like me. And what we have heard so far is really another illustration of your talents. So thank you so much for having me today. As Maria, you just explained, my name is Sylvia Galluser. I live in San Francisco. I'm really thrilled to join you today as a futurist, as a tech innovation strategist at Accenture. Also as an entrepreneur. Before being at Accenture, I created 2 companies, and one of them is Silicon Humanism, which is a futures research company dedicated to exploring the future of tech, of work, of education, of health, and of aging as well. I'm also the host of a think tank dedicated to the ethics of the futures within the Association of Professional Futurists, already really involved into ethical futures. And on top of that, as you just said, I'm a voracious science fiction consumer. As a reader, also as a TV series enjoyer, so you will have a lot of examples from TV series from me today. And finally, I also love to write speculative fiction. So as you imagine, I couldn't be more excited could have been more excited when Maria shared with me the topic of this year's Quantum Thinking Conference. How can we picture the future through the sci-fi lens? So what I want to do is kind of draw a parallel here between the job of a futurist and the specificities of science fiction, and illustrate how sci-fi can be really an incredible tool at the service of the futurists. Marta, Paola, and JP, you have already shown a lot of this, so maybe it will be just a double click on what you've been illustrating so well so far. But back to the process of future stories. So usually you start by studying the environment. You would scan for signals of the future, signals of change, weak signals, you name it. And then out of those, you would extrapolate to build up scenarios and identify opportunities within those future scenarios so that you can finally backcast from those scenarios to build your own action plans or your roadmap to the future. So that's the methodology in a few words. One important aspect of our work as futurists is really to stretch our minds into different directions and to consider futures in plural. One famous methodology by Jim Dater introduced it, for example, for scenarios: growth, constraints, collapse, and transform. It really has the merits, not just considering one best case or one worst case scenarios. And we are here optimist futurists, so I'm glad to hear that, JP. But what we really try to do when we create scenarios is to address different data points on the full future spectrum. So as you build scenarios, you also want to give substance to these prospective scenarios, especially to push the thinking towards where there can be pockets of opportunities within those futures, or even to prepare for potential risk that you can identify in those futures. So to do that, you will want to project stakeholders vividly into those scenarios. As such, a major component of our foresight work is really to help stakeholders with picturing the future. So I like that you use the word picture, because in picturing the future, there's projecting people into those different perspectives and visions of the future to better foresee, but also feel, sense, empathize, and identify opportunities. So therefore, empathy, the capacity to envision, the creativity and storytelling are really key qualities of great futurists. So I'm sure you see where I'm heading. Fiction and science fiction in particular are really an amazing tool to achieve this, to create emotions, to create feelings, reactions, and strong provocations to push you into action towards the future. So I want to focus today on 3 components to kind of launch the conversation, trying to bring here some examples from TV series and a few other sci-fi fiction book. So There's three aspects. The first one is world building. The second is artifacts. And the third one is authenticity. So world building. Sci-Fi takes the time to create not just a story, but really a full world with different layers. You have the social, technological, economic, environmental, political, even legal, and sometimes even ethical, to really follow the steeple analytic framework that we use in futures thinking as well. It will develop rules, roles, constraints, and so on. So, for example, a TV series that do it nicely, and you've been mentioning it as well, Black Mirror. Each installment projects you into a new world in a few seconds, and the interest raised from understanding the rules and the constraints in this new world. And what's also interesting with Black Mirror is that the artistic approach and the variety of colors, of cinematographic techniques and style chosen for each episode really anchors the world building. Another one that I've seen recently and really enjoyed as well is extrapolations. So just the name absolutely refer to our job as futurists. So extrapolations focuses on climate change, but it tells stories from different perspectives so that it really polishes all dimensions of the future. You have the social, environmental, of course, but also business and religion as well as a big, big part in this. So we follow, for example, a former law student becoming a rabbi in order to help the people affected by the rising temperature. You also follow a tech billionaire developing a patent for water desalination to ease the world's problems. Or you follow a researcher that studies the last humpback whale. And another particularity of the series is that it takes place over a very long period of time, which with different data points, and each episode focusing on a time horizon from 2037 to 2070. Another example, Silo, which I also enjoy a lot. It does a great job at creating a society cut off from the exterior world with roles. You have the sheriff, the mayor, judicial, mechanical, and so on. Whereas people that ask to leave the silo are sent out to clean up the windows outside of the silos, which actually becomes not just a part of the world building, but a main dramatic component of the story. So the storyline and the world building are really intertwined, and that's what makes it very exciting. You can think also of The Handmaid's Tale, where Gilead is this dystopian version of the US, with a specific system of values, rules, extremely constrained society that does really not favor women's education and thriving. Just to mention here, the main character, Offred, gets her name from the commander she serves, but it is also an echo to the word offered, as handmaids completely sacrifice themselves to accomplish maternity for their families. And also of red, the very colors that defines those servants. So every little detail contributes to creating that world building. So the vocabulary can be very rich in fiction. I want to kind of double click here. From the relics in Silo, these objects from the past that can vary from harmless items like a pest dispenser to more dangerous objects like a hard drive containing historical data and so on. In the book Clara and the Sun, we have also vocabulary that's quite interesting, like the oblong, which is a sort of tablet or phone, or the concept of being a lifted child, which resonates with being gifted, but also genetic modification to make those kids smarter. Or having an AF, which is an artificial friend. And once again, those concepts are really becoming a main aspect of the plot itself. And this leads us to my second point, which is the artifacts. Some artifacts can be memorable, and thank you so much for all this reference to Minority Report, like the computer interfaces, the full body gestures, the gigantic transparent screens, the voice control homes, the personalized ads that scream the character's name, the movie as he walks by, or even the driveways of driverless cars. All those are absolutely memorable artifacts from Minority Report. You can think also of the steel suits in Dune, which present itself as a full body suit worn in the open desert of the planet Arrakis. And it was specifically designed to preserve the body's moisture. So through the artifacts, you have also a lens onto the world that you're building. In a short story by Ted Chiang that I really like, which is called Exhalation, we get introduced to replacement lungs. So the characters, every day, they consume 2 lungs, heavy with air, and at the end of the day, they remove the empty ones from their chest, and they replace them with full ones. So you have oxygen bar where you literally refill your lungs. The TV series, Hello Tomorrow, to be back to TV, is almost a complete showcase of future artifacts. And even if the series is about an alternate past, you can think of those floating cars or the robot bartender. You have video call booths that are not exactly like the ones we have as we Zoom. You have lunar design everywhere in an hyper-consumer society. So what's particularly interesting here is how these aesthetics have been inspired by how our predecessors imagined the future years ago, and how these imagined artifacts are here brought to life, ready for our delight. And once again, coming back to Black Mirror, because I think that they really do one of the best use of future artifacts. In more traditional sci-fi shows, the viewer is introduced to a new technology in many details. So the character of a newbie, for example, you can think back of Minority Report as the precogs are introduced. Well, in Black Mirror, the logic is a bit different. You first get like visual cues or symbols or metaphors that really require you to engage actively with what is going on. I just name one episode because I could do that for each of them, but in Beyond the Sea with Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett, the artifact is the link between an astronaut in space and their machine replica done on Earth. And it's not introduced in an over-explicative educational manner. It is just placed in the environment for us to be frontally faced with it, to slowly understand the implications and the consequences. So you start to gather cues that something is special as you witness one of the astronauts being weirdly patted by a stranger in a movie theater, or as the parents of the child are questioning the effect of the new setting on him. And what I find particularly interesting with this approach to artifacts, kind of new approach to artifacts, is that it's very similar to how Institute for the Future uses artifacts, that it works with artifacts from the future. It's about placing them in an everyday environment for people to get a strong reaction to those artifacts. And if you think about it, many of Black Mirror episodes focus on one innovation at a time. It is not always a completely new world, but it's more like a world that could be similar to ours, or in the case of that episode I was mentioning in the life in 1969, with a man who cuts hoods with an axe in his backyard, but has this special seat that connects him to his space self in one of the bedrooms. And that leads us to my last point, and I will accelerate a bit because I see we're running out of time here, authenticity. So when sci-fi starts to be a really good tool for futures thinking, I think, is when the goal is not just to display huge amounts of technology, but more to have an authentic story set in a future setting. I would even say that too much science fiction, an overload of advanced technology, can be counterproductive and even off-putting, as the viewer or the reader doesn't find a common ground to really connect and empathize. And I have to admit here that it's often how I feel when I start reading William Gibson, because in the first pages, I get lost with too many new terms or concepts that I have a hard time connecting with each other and with like a potential life. So I really like that new approach, more thoughtful about how much new tech you bring on screen or how much new tech you bring in the first pages. And the way delivering artifacts is more subtle and it's made in a more intimate manner. I think it's both a new trend of current sci-fi, but it's also a great component of success to create effective future thinking. And here's thinking about a couple of examples. Back to Silo. In the first episode of the series, the main characters are trying to have a baby. They have been selected, and they have literally 1 year to try and get pregnant. So it addresses the topic of fertility, but in a very delicate manner, an intimate manner, with a focus on the reactions of the couple as the months pass by and no pregnancy happens, with a focus on mental health. And as relics are introduced, the relics we're mentioning as well, we don't get a lecture on what relics are. We slowly understand that they are objects that you might want to hide, that they are traded on the black market, that they refer to another time. So you discover it from a very personal perspective. And I like, Marta, that you presented Riot Baby and underlined that it's about people and behaviors and not about ideas. That's really what current sci-fi does really great. And my last example to close this topic. Similarly, For Mankind, my favorite one, allocates a lot of space for mental health topics, including grief, anger, feeling lonely in space, alcoholism, jealousy, competition, sexual identity, and so on. So the result is that whatever the time frame, this closes the gap with your current self and the notion of an estranged future self. Those characters in the future feel human. They feel close to us. They have similar concerns and joys. They live similar dramas, and we empathize strongly with them. In For Mankind, the head of NASA is a woman who loves to listen to jazz music, talking about music again, and play the piano, which is a genuine touch to the character. And it reminds us that people are not unidimensional in the way they could be depicted in old-fashioned series, where sometimes the storyline and the intensity of science fiction and action took over the development of believable characters. Marta also mentioned how Black Mirror makes the story personal and almost like you are the main character of the story. So as a consequence, characters displaying tastes, complexities, and ambiguities, dilemma, it makes them more agents of their future. They seem less predetermined to act. And this reminds us also of our own human dilemmas, but also empowerment, that we can act on the future. Thank you.
Sylvia, thank you so much. And you just gave us so many great examples and great references that I feel that I definitely will have to watch this event again on our channel on YouTube. Take some notes because I have a whole new watch list and reading list ahead of me. So thank you so much. So let's go to the roundtable, the questions. We're going to put you three here on the screen. And I have a couple of questions that I have prepared. And then we're going to see if the audience has more questions for you guys. Let's begin with Paula. But still, I'd like to have each one of your personal perspectives on that, okay? So Paula, regarding utopian versus dystopian futures, and so as we heard, we know that when it comes to the future, the dystopian ones are usually the more popular, right? Is what sells more. But do you believe that this somehow incentivizes a darker future perspective? And that's something that JP also covered a little when saying, that's what we project towards, right? So let's try to make it positive to have a better future. But on the other hand, there's this growing idea of a future filled with abundance. So Paula, what's your personal thought about it? And do you feel that you're more like optimistic regarding our future or more on the dystopian side of things?
I'm not dystopian, but I'm not optimistic as well. But I was thinking about the movements like solar punk and other speculative fiction movements that try to do this undystopical kind of thought on the future, on the possible ones. I do think we put atoms and carbon over something we think before. And so we are now, let's say, everything we're living now were thought about, were imagined before, almost everything, but it was imagined before. And as we have this opportunity to imagine and to do this desirable framework of the future, it's something we could attach to, because the dystopia is over the corner, and it's easy to get there, as we've been trained to naturalize, to make it current, to make current some feelings, some kind of political actions. Marta was talking about this authoritarian governments and corporates. I had read a lot about it. Everyone here read about it, and so we are making it more palatable for the times that are coming. And just to close regarding this, I always like to think utopia for who? For whom? And dystopia for whom? This focus on trying to go beyond the hegemonic ways of looking to the future, mostly by the global north. And I think maybe even when we think about utopia, and maybe we're trying to figure out an utopia that just suits the white, the rich, and everything, and everyone that has always been they always took a positive approach from governments and companies and so. And I think if you are looking towards a diverse and really comprehensive future, that I really wish this for my children, and I think everyone does. We should and we are in a way, but we should stimulate to make people go beyond the ways we think about the future now. That's why I like the solar punk, the luna punk, and we are trying to make different, and I think it is.
Great points, Paula. JP, what's your take on that?
So my opinion is either, utopian or dystopian. I believe in balance of trade. I believe in yin yang. I believe that both will happen equally. It's just a matter of being prepared on, of an imagined perfect or ideal society versus oppressive or postal society, right? Harmony versus chaos, equality versus inequality. And to Paula's comment, what I would wish for my kids as well is, of course, the perfect, the harmonized, the ideal, the peaceful future. And while I feel that we have to project that and we have to get more of that, we need to be realistic futurists, right? Because those things are going to happen. It's not all about, everybody being the same or thinking the same, but I think the advantage that we can place on that variable is that we have to dream without boundary, right? So when we start to get boundaries, we start to get shaped up by the world. And, myself included, when I'm teaching my kids and maybe giving them limits on thinking about the future or thinking how things could become, we have to, look into ourselves and say, should we open up for whatever way of thinking, including the dystopian positioning of thinking about future? And I think we should, because we have to prepare for that to happen, right? So when we talk about, I think, Sylvia was mentioning about, social tech, environment, political, legal, ethical. What came to my mind also is what we're doing here at Microsoft with a responsible AI, for example, and how we need to be aware of what that technology can bring us to and take all the steps that we need to take so we can bring the best out of that technology, aiming for the good and mitigating as much as we can for the dystopian side. So that's my point.
Sylvia.
Well, that's an amazing question. And here I have to kind of be a bit schizophrenic, because me as a futurist, like foresight practitioners, consultant, and more like living a futurist life, I always try to vulgarize, evangelize, and democratize about futures. And I feel I have a mission to comfort people about the future, to give them nice visions, to give them back their agency, and to replace anxiety about the future with some enthusiasm and excitement about the future. Now, me as a writer, I have to say that optimism makes very bad storytelling. I remember at some point engaging with a small group of other futurists on speculative optimism, and we started writing about it. And it was just not interesting to read, like in terms of engagement as a reader. And I really understood the complexity of these two aspects. So first of all, I think one way to address different scenarios, as we mentioned, different methodology, like full spectrum thinking or 4 scenarios and matricial scenario planning. The other solution, in terms like going back to sci-fi, I would say is perhaps to envision positive futures, but that the drama comes not from the future, but from the personal story. I don't know if that makes sense, but the environment could be an interesting picture of the future, but to make it engaging and to have people watch the show or read the book, to have a very personal story that is complex and that raises some dramatic effects. And in a sense, I'm thinking that that's maybe why some aspect of future fiction, recent future fiction, are really interesting. If you think back of For Mankind or Hello Tomorrow, these are not like terrible vision of the future. What's terrible is more like the personal stories in this. So that would be maybe a way to reconcile our optimism. And yeah, I'll stop here now. What to say?
So thinking about how uncertain, right, is our future, and how could people and businesses maybe use all this sci-fi creativity that we've been talking about here today and apply all those future scenarios techniques to be prepared for the unknown? Doesn't matter if we're more optimistic, if we're more pessimistic. I think that what we have in common here and what everybody agree is that somehow we have to prepare, either by envisioning it in a more positive way or imagining the negative so you can prepare for that. So what are the techniques? Sylvia, I'm getting this back to you. What's your take on that? And then we can go around for the other JP and Paula.
So the technique to work on creating scenarios with corporates and clients, that's what you mean?
Yeah, like how could we use both sci-fi and using imagination and using future scenarios to actually apply in our daily lives to better prepare for the future, not only in a corporate way, but also for our day-to-day,
Yeah, that's a great question. I can think of a few initiatives. There was one, I think it was Project Red or something. It was with the army in France. They use fiction to actually create scenarios of the future to inspire the French army and prepare for possible attacks that could happen in different scenarios. And really bringing participants, stakeholders, direct military, into this was really interesting. And what they did also is they didn't stop with the direct people involved from militaries. They involved like different categories of the society, so that the scenarios are not just like how the military would see the world, but how also business and people. So there were science fiction writers that were part of these scenarios, but also people from the industry and people from different categories, like the steeple environment that we were mentioning earlier. And for me, it has really been a great example of how we can use sci-fi for real life scenarios. Now, more to my personal experience, I liked at some point, like I like to start with a very methodical approach to futures. Like really, I spend a lot of time and on the definition of the landscape today, understanding the landscape today, what is happening, what are the big trends, then signal scanning. But at some point in the process, when we have all this raw data, like very strong analytical framework, that's when it starts to be interesting to kind of open our imagination to imagining the future. And here you need methodology to be able to go from the analytical framework to envisioning the future. And a great way to do it is, if, for example, we proceed to what I call like futures envisioning or futures meditation. Like you really put people in a situation of meditation and you get them to relax and close their eyes and think about the future through the five senses approach or through a day in the life approach. And like, what if they wake up in that world, and how does the lights look like? How does your home look like? So I think that's a step to help us go from a very rational approach to a more meditative and envisioning approach. And of course, creating artifacts or creating headlines for the future, from the futures, or creating pieces of fiction, collaboration, or even using gamified tools is really interesting. And I work in metaverse, so using also VR to project people and have them interact with scenarios of the future is a really great way to conduct that type of work.
Great. So JP, what about you?
Thank you for the question, Maria. Thinking about a corporation, so I've worked in multiple corporations, right? Building my own when I was 21 and then working as an entrepreneur inside corporations more than an employee, right? So I love the way that we can collaborate inside big companies and how big companies portray innovation, or at least doesn't put barriers for us to dream and to think big, right? And as an example, in Microsoft, AI, right, is not something new for us. We have been investing since, don't quote me on that, but maybe 1997 or so. It's not from last year, right? With OpenAI and everything that has been happening right now, as well as responsible AI discussions are not happening this or last year, have been, under discussions for a while. So having access, of course, with lots of investments in R&D, but most importantly, that R&D being able to be filtered to innovation labs to portray creative spaces, and of course, again, without boundaries and with a lot of diversity, which is something that we proudly have here at Microsoft. Hackathons, we're going to have another one this year, 2023 in September, and multiple stakeholders actively participating on whole hackathons. For example, I'm in sales, I'm a sales director, but I am going to participate as a mentor and learn from the programmers, how they're thinking, how they're doing their own design thinking as a designer as well, right? I did engineering, designer, economy, and some others, but on design thinking, going to design fiction, which I love the way that we have portrayed this today with Marta, and everyone here has the same approach, as well as the study that she shared. Microsoft ourselves did, with the science fiction writers with the Future Visions study, right? So it's multiple variables that we can have as techniques to get there. But I think for me, if I can summarize into one word or two words, the most important thing in my view with companies and corporations to innovating and reaching that future that we want to reach is taking risks, right? So these two words, or risks, these two words on taking risks is truly something that it has to come from the culture of the company. The company does not have to put boundaries on that, and risks are going to be used to learn fast, and then take more risks, to err, to get some things right, majority wrong, do it all again, right? So that virtual cycle will take us there into the journey that we're projecting. So that's my take on technique and big corporations doing so.
Great points, JP, and not only be able to take risks, but also be more tolerant. And as you mentioned, most of the things will not work, so be more tolerant to that, and also be quick to pivot, right? And just keep moving on. I absolutely love that. Paula, what's your take on that?
I'll try to address this, bringing up something that I made up from the last question and answers, very rich answers that brought me to think about this is more of a philosophical approach, let's say, but I was thinking about utopia and dystopia. I couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. But rather than solving all the problems we have, or on the other way, falling into dysfunction, I'd like to bring this protopia option that some of the futurists has been approaching since Kevin Kelly from Wired brought this term, this idea. And there's this futures consultant called Monica Bielski. She acts mostly within the entertainment industry, Universal Studios and DreamWorks, and mostly for future approaches, let's say in Black Panther and something like this. I was reading an interview with her the other day, and if we can, as entrepreneurs or companies, thinking about this other future, this protopia future, let's say, this is a framework in which we can maybe bring up some more regenerative and inclusive vision for the futures, the desirable futures, as an alternative from this binary utopian dystopia. I was thinking about this as this, let's say, an accountability that we should be not as a heavy way to think about it. This is not about anti-capitalism. That would be good, but it's not about it. But it makes me think about what's the responsibility of those players that have amounts of money and data and power in a way that it's never been existed before, as Shoshana Zuboff says regarding the surveillance capitalism. And so if we are thinking about the future visions from those stakeholders that sometimes look at the utopia as kind of distraction from the planet destruction that we are now seeing and feeling, that can be mitigated from the decisions from those players. And so I think we can make an intersection, or maybe a middle path in between the utopia and dystopia, and plug more this responsibility of the economic players in a way that it can move society towards we want it to be. It's just food for thought here.
It's actually a very important thought, Paula, and taking responsibility of each one of us and each of the stakeholders here. And I actually, and coming back again to the dystopian or versus utopian, your point was also really perfectly put as to whom, right? So thanks, everybody. And I heard that actually a friend of ours, a future hacker as well, right, Eduardo, has something for us. So there's something in the chat that you'd like to bring it up, right?
Yes, Maria, and we have one question here from Dimitris, and the question is, how can we ensure that our vision for speculative futures incorporates diverse perspectives and fosters inclusivity to prevent reinforcing existing inequalities? Who would like to start with?
Big question.
Yeah.
I can tackle this one first, if you don't mind. Maybe my point of view would be a little bit of what I spoke about previously. First of all, Paula, thank you for the Protopia explanation. Loved it. And by the way, just full disclosure, I am multitasking and co-piloting while we're doing this session. So I am speaking with Bing chat, and I'm asking some questions and getting a lot of feedback. So I'm trying to build my own superhuman into the conversation to get more acquainted to all such new terms and such new learning that I have been, able to portray on this session. So I appreciate that, both from this session being virtual, or else I wouldn't be able to do that. And secondly, for the technology to be inclusive and to be diverse in a way that I can punch in whatever question I have and have a conversation with a responsible AI that has, me covered in this session. So I think that's part of my answer, Dimitris, is how can we be, diverse on these future speculations, and how can we ensure it is an equal playing field? And that depends on us, all of us. First of all, the ones that do not believe in the matrix that Marta drew on the future being better or worse, us controlling or not controlling, and people putting themselves closer to not controlling than controlling the future, we're wrong. We are controlling the future. So if we all collectively believe we're controlling that future, it will be more diverse, it will be more inclusive, but we have to get that communication, that message to the right people for them to understand that they're able to do that. And that is not an easy task, because technology has to be pervasive, connectivity has to reach everyone, data and information have to reach everyone. And this is a little bit of what I spoke as well about data, right? Data, AI, for example, is as good as its data, right? So if the data is skewed, if the data only talks about optimism, talks about great things, etc., when you're going to talk to a Bing chat, for example, about optimism, it's going to give you great answers, but it's a skewed way. And that happens with gender, that happens with religious beliefs, that happens with politics beliefs. And what I love to see is more involvement of all companies, as we are already trying to do. But most importantly, learning from Sylvia, learning from Paul and from Marta on our collective thinking and our collective way of communicating that we have the power to change that future. And we have access to that power to change the future. So it's a complex, and I would say too utopian way of thinking, but to Paula's point, as a protopian, more, equalized or more balanced, as a society is getting better, each day, and not, becoming black or white, but again, yin yang society, maybe that's what protopia would mean. I think that's the way that we should all aim to.
Thanks, JP. And you know what? When we're just talking, made me think about, the power of education and literacy and empowerment, right? And that's at the end what you're talking about. So we are privileged here, and we do have the power for that, but we do have this huge challenge of, bringing education, bringing literacy, and empowering people so we can reach this possible future, right? Paula or Sylvia, do you have anything to add?
I have a quick just a sentence to bring regarding it. Sorry, Sylvia, but it's just this: bringing diverse people to the table. That's the only way we can reach diverse future. There's easy as that, is simple as that. I think we are sometimes talking about this from a very privileged point of view, a very global north point of view, as we've been talking about it all the way. But it's about it, bringing people to the table and making up a pool of people that can think the future the way that quantum reaches the needs and desires of as much people as we can.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I absolutely highlight that aspect as well. I think at the core of the profession, of the futurist profession, we question our practice of futures thinking. I was mentioning that we opened this forum of ethics of futures within the Association of Professional Futurists to make sure we include a variety of perspective. We always question the fact that when we talk about a group, a population, like, do we belong? Are we trying to look at it through another lens? What are we saying? We try to democratize, demystify, and bring in more indigenous perspective in the way we do it. The second thing that's absolutely, I completely agree with you both. And as you were saying, Paula, it's really about bringing diverse perspectives, including people from different fields, from different country, different religion, different ethnicities, different genders, to co-create. And I would say that our internet today aims to be more inclusive, more diverse, with less big corporation-led initiatives and something closer to a creator economy that favor individuals to contribute. So that's the second layer, like the layer of professional futurists, like trying to include those layers, but also like think about like the world we're building, make sure we include all those perspectives as well. And the third layer, and here once again, it's more the technology speaking, but use immersive experiences and VR. These are tools that really foster empathy. There've been numbers of studies showing that. I'm thinking of 2 VR experiences that I would really like to highlight and like invite you to take a look at. One is an exhibition called Traveling While Black during the segregation, giving you a perspective of what was the impact on the population of such roles, but living it from an inner perspective. The second one is the beautiful VR experiences out of the movie Notes on Blindness. They developed a VR experience where you hear an audio sound, and it's mostly a dark experience where you see less and less of the world around you, and it gives you to see what it means to lose sight. And when you go through those experiences, because VR has really this mnemonic effect where you remember that particularly well, this has an impact that can be sometimes even stronger than just watching a movie or reading a story. So yeah, that would be my answer. Of course, a bit biased here, but invite you to or that type of immersive experiences that can really help with empathy and diversity and inclusion.
Maria, can I jump in here? Sorry,
Please,
I know it's out of order, but love what both Paula and Sylvia said. First, Paula, 100% agree, and I'll point to this session here. One thing that got me excited to participate in this roundtable is that I'm with Sylvia, Paula, and Marta, and not with JP, Paulo, and Jose, and João, again, 4 males. We are all trying to be as diverse as we can. We have to even amplify further this. This is one of the numerous reasons that I decided to get out of a comfortable job position at Cisco and move to Microsoft, diversity and inclusion. And that speaks volume to a company that walks the walk and talks the talk. And I'm very impressed by the company taking that step and being able to portray different point of views. So I totally agree with your point. And we need to get better. I'm not saying we're on the utopian yet, but we're getting on the protopian side of the conversation. Let's put it that way. And Sylvia, I love your comment on AR, VR to getting us into their shoes, right? There's even another one that is called We Live Here, about homeless people and how they're losing their homes. And you're living in a place in the middle of nowhere with your family picture that you lost your house and little food that you have to find, and police raging on your tent, breaking it up, and you losing your home, which brings to our Maslow necessities of the human being, right? To have a shelter, to have food, to have a life. And then when you think about people, once you have those experiences, the blindness one, right? I have an aunt that is blind, and she always goes to the movie with her dog. And this is like a long time ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And people are blocking her. You cannot go into the movies. You can't see you. And the dog is, how can I not see? What do you mean I cannot see? Is it because I'm blind? Of course I can see. I see in my mind. Doesn't mean that I see the same way as you, right? So it's a beautiful positions that you both brought today. I just wanted to jump in, and that got me emotional. Thank you, Maria.
JP, your passion is contagious, really. And such a great conversation here. Unfortunately, we're almost getting to the end of the event, but I still have, let's say, a surprise questions for you guys. We have about 10 minutes, okay? And then we are wrapping up. But I'd like to invite you guys to record here with all those witnesses here. If you had a chance to give your future self a message, which message would it be? Who wants to jump in? Go ahead, Paula.
I hope you're doing your very best to become a good ancestral. Or ancestry, sorry, broken English. But anyway, you got it.
Yeah.
That's a difficult one. I would say probably just something like, congrats, girl, you made it so far. So see, life can be difficult, but just keep on doing it. And just to mention, there's a website where you can write a letter to your future self. And I did that exercise with my two daughters. We did that as a family, and that was a fantastic experience to try to write that letters to our future self. I was more inspired than right now. Maybe that's a bit personal, but I invite you to do that. That's a fantastic personal exercise to practice. And I like the questions, Maria, just a bit intimidated here.
JP?
I love that question. Before I tell you mine, I've heard from one of our executives back at our headquarters in Seattle, in Redmond, on the same question that he was asked. And he said to the audience, I didn't want to go through, and I'm not going to get into details just to portray an anonymity and broken English as well, Paula. Sorry about that. I don't need to get to what I went through with my family and with the illness that they had to be able to wake up to pay attention more to my family, right? So the message is from him is, I hope I didn't need to go through what I went to, to change a little bit of what I am today. And I would say that this is something that, speaks volume to my heart, which is don't wait for a mistake to happen to be able to change your mindset and continue having that opportunity of making mistakes and learning from them, but don't wait for it to happen. If your heart instinct says, go for it, just go for it, embrace it, and continue being who you are. So that's the message that I would send JP. Please record this, and I'll listen to it 50 years from now, I hope.
Everything will be recorded. And it's actually going to be available next week on YouTube. I just stole Eduardo's phrase now, but I had to tell it. And guys, thank you so much. Such a rich content. I'm so glad and I'm so thankful for you guys. A lot to exchange, a lot to think about. Make sure you also follow us on social media if you enjoyed being with us today. All our content is available on YouTube channel. We are also on Instagram, LinkedIn, you choose. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.